Okay, so Ms. Cherylanne Menezes completed her master's degree in Foundations and Perspectives for a Culture of Unity with specialization in Trinitarian Ontology from Sofia University at Florence, Italy, with her thesis on Unity in the Triune God in Chiara Lubitsch, the Locus and Way to Christian-Hindu Dialogue. She was an auditor at the Synod of Bishops on the topic Young People, Faith and Vocational Discernment in October 2018 at the Vatican. That is where we both met for the first time and have known each other ever since then. And later she was appointed as the advisor to the National Youth Commission of the CCBI in August 2019. She also lectures at the University of Mumbai for advanced diploma and certificate courses on mysticism, particularly Christian mysticism, since 2014, and is a member of the Interfaith Dialogue Committee of the Focolare movement in India, and has worked for the coordination and organization of Hindu Christian symposia held in Rome and in India in various years. And she's also, as I said, presently co-responsible for the Focolare movement in Bombay since 2017 and works as an operations manager at Kimya that is a leather chemical company. And with this, we welcome you, Cheryl, and she would be speaking to us about particularly interfaith, that is the topic religions at the service of fraternity in our world in the document, which will be more on the lines of interreligious dialogue and beyond boundaries of fraternity, beyond boundaries of religion. So over to you, Cheryl. Thank you.
Thank you, Percy. And thank you to the ICYM and to the CCBI Commission for Theology and Doctrine for this initiative of bringing this beautiful, reflective and inspirational text of Pope Francis closer to us common people. In this two-day event, we have already seen different perspectives of Fratelli Tutti, and surely there could be others too, because they are all interlinked. The one, as Percy was saying, asked of me is interreligious fraternity. And I hope to give you some highlights in this direction and some hints on its practical application from this perspective. In his typical style, even in this encyclical, Pope Francis reflects on the current complex reality of the world, like we saw yesterday, and encourages, guides, and directs the church, as Christians, first of all, to be in dialogue with this reality, like Jesus did in his time, and not to pull ourselves out or look for immediate solutions. Because it's only through dialogue that we can draw out from the eternal richness of the gospel new ways to respond to the current social and cultural reality. This is the way the church grows and understands ever more the universality of the message of Jesus, which is applicable for all times. But what kind of a world did Jesus come to establish? What is the kind of world we are dreaming of? Let's look at this short clip so that we can start on a high note and a hopeful note. Don't forget also to read the subtitles, which are in English. So I asked Percy to put on the clip.
Yes, Cheryl, just a minute. Just let me know if you're able to hear the audio as well.
No, we're not able to hear the audio. No,
Is it
Percy,
audible now?
we're not able to hear the audio.
Okay.
No, we're not able to hear the audio. It starts with the music. Percy, we're not able to hear the audio.
When we do not discard those who are of little use,
Maybe we can start, from the beginning.
may the day come when we do not discard those who are of little use to us. May the day come when we do not discard those who are of little use to us.
זמן אשר בו כבר לא בא בחשבון ההתעלמות מהזולת.
E la politica si basi sul dialogo.
Excuse me, are you doing screen sharing? Is there a video too? Is there a video too or only an audio? There's a video too?
Yes.
No, because there's nothing coming on the screen.
Universal e a paz social.
Cherylanne, excuse me, is there a video too?
Yes, Carol, we are able to see it also.
Oh, okay, I'll leave and then join that. Thank you, sorry.
كما قال قداسته في الرسالة العامة Fratelli Tutti.
En ese momento nos abriremos más a las otras culturas.
Wir werden denen in die Augen schauen, die wir jetzt noch ignorieren.
Et nous penserons à leur dignité au lieu de les juger.
Let's work together every day to make that day come. Fourth February, International Day of Human Fraternity.
Well, that probably some of you would have already seen, or you remember that it has been declared, though just on the just a few last week rather. This is something that is born from Fratelli Tutti. It's the world that we are, looking forward to, and it was a result also of the Declaration on Human Fraternity signed in Abu Dhabi. And that's exactly what we've seen in this video, a glimpse of the aim of Fratelli Tutti. This is the kind of world that the Pope is presenting to us if we are able to really come together as brothers and sisters. This is the dream of Jesus when he asked that all may be one. Now, coming to Fratelli Tutti, let's try to answer some questions like, why is Pope Francis talking about interreligious fraternity and dialogue? What are some of the takeaways from Fratelli Tutti from an interreligious perspective? And maybe at the end, we can discuss some practical applications in our lives. It was nice, some of the questions that you raised yesterday, and we can continue this discussion even today. So why is Pope Francis talking about interreligious fraternity and dialogue? Is it something new in the church? Yes and no. Yes, simply because the Holy Spirit always has something new to tell us and does not repeat itself. Yes, also because Pope Francis elevates universal fraternity to a new dimension by including it as part of church documents in the magisterium of the church. From an interreligious perspective, he underlines in a strong way that interreligious dialogue and collaboration for us Catholics is not an option, but a necessity in being Christian. If you like, as I speak, you could also put down maybe some points or something that strikes you, because although you will get your notes later, maybe you'd want to bring it up when we are discussing later, or something that you want to take back with you. So it is important that at every level, from a personal to the institutional level, we start processes of dialogue, keeping in mind that this is an investment for our church today and the future. And I think also keeping in mind our young people, whom we say are the church today, they have to see and be part of these processes along with us. Also, no, it is not something new, because Pope Francis is in continuity with his predecessors. With regards to the relationship of the Catholic Church with faithful of other religions, a path-breaking event in the Catholic Church was the Second Vatican Council, which marked a clear change of direction. An example of this is in the important conciliar documents like Lumen Gentium and Nostra Aetate. In fact, Nostra Aetate is also quoted in Fratelli Tutti, and it proposes two greatly innovative attitudes in considering the relations with people of different religious tradition. One, a new perspective from which the Catholic Church is called to look at other religions, where it says the Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and holy in these religions. She regards with sincere reverence those ways of conduct and of life, those precepts and teachings, which, though differing in many aspects from the ones she holds and sets forth, nonetheless often reflects a ray of that truth which enlightens all men. And also Nostra Aetate invites Catholics to engage in dialogue with fellow followers of other religious traditions. And it was the first time in 2000 years that the Catholic Church invited all Catholics to a new experience, the one of dialogue. The two main pillars of this relationship among people of different religions are God as a father of the whole mankind, and consequently brotherhood and sisterhood among all human beings. Even the pontificates of the previous popes, John the 23rd, especially Paul VI, and even John Paul II, were strong examples of interreligious dialogue and reconciliation. We remember Sister Inigo also mentioned yesterday when she was talking about Swami Agnivesh, who was present at one of the World Day of Peace that John Paul II initiated in '86, inviting leaders of all major religions in Assisi for a universal prayer for peace in the world. But Pope Francis is also speaking of religious fraternity because it is the sign and the need of the times. We all know the ongoing escalation of violence in the name of religion, terrorism, curbing of religious freedom, be it in the Middle East, in Europe, in Asia, and America. And it is also intensified by different religious affiliations. However, we also know that this is provoked by forms of extremism, fanaticism, which distort the interpretation of religious tenets, because whoever uses religion to foment violence, as John Paul II said, contradicts its most authentic and profound aspiration. The offense against the human person is ultimately an offense against God. So no religious goal can justify the practice of violence against another. So with this scenario, can religions play a role in building a more fraternal world? I remember once at an international interreligious meeting, it was somewhere after the Twin Tower attack, 9/11 attack, when religion or particular religions were heavily criticized and blamed for the chaos that the world was in. And Chiara Lubich, the founder of the Folklore and invitee at this meeting, was asked a similar question. Can religions be partners in peace building? She had given a very powerful reply, and I remember a point that she mentioned that caught my attention. She said, where, if not in great faith traditions, can fraternity start? The enormous spiritual and moral resources, the aspiration to justice, the commitment to the needy, all spring from religious sentiments. And these, when channeled into human relations, get translated into actions that positively influence the international order. So instead of being a problem, she instilled in my mind the great potential that all religions actually have. And she continued, that's why we need to spread the idea and practice of fraternity. Brothers and sisters know how to look after one another, to share what they have. And the contribution of religions in this is decisive. And Pope Francis is totally on these lines. He has entitled the 8th chapter of the encyclical, Religions at the Service of Fraternity. The Holy Father highlights the importance of focusing on what is essential to the faith of all faiths, worship of God and love of neighbor. Fraternity leads us to open ourselves to the Father of all and to see the other as a brother, a sister, to share life or to support one another, to love, to know the other. In 274, he writes, from our faith experience and from the wisdom accumulated over centuries, but also from the lessons learned from our many weaknesses and failures, we, the believers of different religions, know that our witness to God benefits our societies. The effort to seek God with a sincere heart helps us recognize one another as traveling companions, truly brothers and sisters. We are convinced that when in the name of an ideology, there is an attempt to remove God from a society, that society ends up adoring idols. And very soon, men and women lose their way, their dignity is trampled, and their rights are violated. So here's the cause of all our problems. It should be acknowledged, he writes in 75, paragraph 75. Among the most important causes of the crisis of the modern world are a desensitized human conscience, a distancing from religious values, and the prevailing individualism, materialistic philosophies that deify the human person and introduce worldly and material values in place of supreme and transcendental principles. Room needs to be made for reflections born of religious traditions. He's talking about all religious traditions. Room needs to be made for reflections born of religious traditions that are a repository of centuries of experience and wisdom. For religious classics can prove meaningful in every age. They have an enduring power to open new horizons, to stimulate thought, to expand the mind and the heart. And this space, I think, for interreligious reflection is missing. there's much that can be done here. It needs to be created, it needs to be fostered. And he's speaking and challenging us Christians, Catholics, members of the church, giving us a hint on what more we can do. Another dimension that the Pope brings out in choosing the parable of the Good Samaritan, which we could consider true to all believers in God, whichever religion they belong to, is what he says in paragraph 74. We also read it yesterday. One detail about the passers-by stands out. They were religious, devoted to the worship of God, a priest, a Levite. This detail should not be overlooked. It shows that belief in God and the worship of God are not enough to ensure that we are actually living in a way pleasing to God. So he is inviting us to practice our faith, which is based on respect for each human person. In 282, he says, we believers are challenged to return to our sources in order to concentrate on what is essential, worship of God and love for our neighbor, lest some of our teachings taken out of context end up feeding forms of contempt, hatred, xenophobia, or negation of others. The truth is that violence has no basis in our fundamental religious conviction, but only in their distortion. I was just thinking sometimes contempt, hatred, xenophobia, or negation of others subtly enters our minds, our homes, our communities, if we are not careful. For example, when we pass on certain videos and news on social media without thinking twice, whether we are constructing or we are destroying. Or when we make comments on a religion because of a political or economic manipulation without distinguishing the wrong from the wrongdoer and his religion. When we keep silent because it doesn't affect our religion, it was a provocation by sister yesterday. It doesn't bother me, we say. What are we doing if not subtly fanning this sort of contempt or hatred, the xenophobia or negation of the other? In the parable, the Samaritan is not a Jew, whereas the Levite and the priest are Jews. The Samaritan was not a blood brother, nor a brother as part of the same religion of the half-dead man, but he chose to become a neighbor of the victim and acted as a brother should. It's a beautiful example how we can also choose to become brothers or sisters among us faithful of different religions. This witness of proximity among us believers in God, in the transcendent, and in the favor of the victims can be a model of fraternity, of social friendship among all, especially where attempts are made to remove God from our society. For Pope Francis, fraternity is a fraternity based on the victim. And this closeness and assistance to those in need, righteousness, fidelity, love for the common good, concern for others, especially those in need, benevolence, mercy, are all elements that we share with various religions. So what are some of the takeaways from an interreligious perspective? Before I come to the takeaways, I feel it's important to say that Pope Francis, through his words, gestures, documents, trips, is constantly communicating to us a vision of reality, I feel, from the eyes of God. That's why he's always full of hope, notwithstanding the dark clouds. A friend of mine was telling me the Pope can do all he does and say what he says because he has a backing of 2000 years of church history, and also because being a Pope, he has a special grace to read the sign of times, a prophetic vision of reality, and to lead the church accordingly. It's like when in a crowd, you are trying to see what is ahead of you, but it's difficult. Then you sit on someone's shoulder and you see something. Then you stand on someone's shoulder, you get an even better vision. And that's how it is. The higher you go, the further you are able to see. So with all the grace and the capabilities that Pope Francis has, he helps us see the world as God sees it and encourages us to take the necessary steps there where we are, but keeping in mind this beautiful and hopeful vision of the world in the making, and keep it in our hearts and in our minds as we continue our journey and involve ourselves in our daily life in dialogue. Having said this, I would highlight maybe 3 takeaways from Fratelli Tutti. Surely there could be others. One, I see fraternity as a point of departure and a point of arrival. I see fraternity as a fruit of an experience of dialogue. And another takeaway is adopting dialogue as a lifestyle to foster fraternity. So we said fraternity is not just a point of arrival where we have to reach, but it's a point of departure. And I think this makes a big difference in interreligious dialogue, in any dialogue for that matter. In paragraph 272, the Pope writes, as believers, we are convinced that without an openness to the Father of all, there will be no solid and stable reason for an appeal to fraternity. We are certain that only with this awareness that we are not orphans but children, we can live in peace with one another. For reason by itself is capable of grasping the equality between men and women and of giving stability to their civic coexistence, but it cannot establish fraternity. So what do we need to establish fraternity? We need to first recognize that we are brothers and sisters. And truly we are brothers and sisters for the very fact that we believe that God is our Father. So as a consequence, first of all, we are brothers and sisters before being followers of our own religion also. God loves me as he loves the other. He looks out for me, searches for me to find and build a rapport with me just as he does with the other. If we have this mentality in front of every person we meet, the person of another religion, it already changes the way I relate to the person. This is the starting point, and then of course the journey begins, and it leads us to a deeper fraternal relationship which stretches beyond bonds of family relationships to reach and embrace every human being, man or woman, citizen or foreigner, my country, my religion or the other. One can also assert that all are brothers and sisters because the entire human race is a family. So fraternity is a value so constitutive to humanity and so universal that one finds it affirmed in some degree in all major religions. This is a common point of dialogue, and we have to continue to search for the things that unite us, that we can live together. But there are also differences. Differences also mean the awareness that one has something unique to offer the other. It's this awareness that gives rise to the need to know the other better and to grow in our knowledge and understanding of the eternal truth. John Paul II used to often say, we are journeying together as pilgrims towards the truth. So, as Pope Francis also says in his introduction, let us dream then as a single human family, as fellow travelers sharing the same flesh, as children of the same earth, which is our common home, each of us bringing the richness of his or her beliefs and convictions, each of us with his or her own voice, brothers and sisters all. Second point, fraternity as a fruit of an experience of dialogue. Fratelli Tutti may not be a document on interreligious relations per se, but it is born from an experience of an interreligious encounter and dialogue with the Muslim world. As we saw on 4th of February 2019, the attention of the whole world was taken when Pope Francis made an apostolic journey to the United Arab Emirates, and together with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar Mosque University in Cairo, they signed the document on human fraternity for world peace. But the Pope and the Grand Imam spent almost half a year drafting this document before announcing it to the world. This is enough to grasp the importance given by Pope Francis to interreligious dialogue. But there's more. In some paragraphs, Pope Francis in his statements uses the first person in plural, we. For example, with the great Imam al-Tayyib. So he's referring to the we, together with. In this gesture, Pope Francis allows the words of a Muslim dignitary to be inserted in an encyclical which is accepted in the magisterium of the Church. This is not of little importance. In drafting the encyclical, he is concretely living what he has written in chapter 6 on the concept and practice of dialogue, which is not an exchange of opinions, but the ability to respect the point of view of the other. We also know that Pope Francis writes the most beautiful words on dialogue and fraternity through his gestures, like the one on 27th of March 2020, when he walked alone in the silence of St. Peter's Square and gave the special Urbi et Orbi blessing. It was a great example of proximity and fraternity with the suffering humanity. Or when he planned his first visit as Pope to Lampedusa to visit the suffering migrants who had landed on the shores. Were they all Catholics? I doubt. Pope Francis invites us to live interreligious fraternity, which is being brothers and sisters to all in our daily lives with concrete gestures and actions. Doesn't take much. And the third point, adopting dialogue as a lifestyle to foster interreligious fraternity. Yesterday, Father Chetan was saying that when we read parts of Fratelli Tutti, we say we know all this. And the same thing we can say about dialogue or interreligious dialogue. It's not something new for us who live in India. And yet, there's a lot to be done in experiencing the sense of being brothers and sisters with those of all religions. Maybe there is something that we need to learn or unlearn in our understanding of interreligious dialogue so that we too, in our own way, can put Fratelli Tutti into action. We really need to invest in our relationships with our brothers and sisters of other religious traditions. It is an imperative and not an option for us Christians. And I would say we as Indians are fortunate to have an opportunity to be exposed to people of various religions. This is probably a novelty in other continents where they are struggling with the migrants of other religions. And so our constructive and positive experience can be a light to many peoples. First of all, why do we need to enter into dialogue? The Church has entered into dialogue out of fidelity to her Lord and Master, who from the beginning, moved by love, wished to enter into dialogue and friendship with us. This itself should be enough reason for us to do the same. There are also different ways to interreligious dialogue. Some were mentioned yesterday by Father Francis. On a broad level, there is the dialogue of life. There is the dialogue of action. And then when we are better prepared, there is the academic and theological dialogue on scripture and spirituality. The dialogue of life, according to me, is the most important, because the dialogue of life is the foundation of any of the other dimensions of dialogue. Being involved in the dialogue of action requires first and foremost the dialogue of life. And even the academic dialogue, and I can say this with our experience of decades of experience in interreligious dialogue, even the academic dialogue is sterile if it is not accompanied by the dialogue of life. So I'll just throw some points now, and I'd like you to reflect on it and see whether it reflects something in your life, some experience that you have lived in these areas of dialogue, or something that strikes you. Dialogue is an attitude that must be lived every day. It is about sharing the experiences of daily life in all its concreteness, with its joys and sufferings, its struggles and hopes, its festivities. It takes on shared responsibilities. It plans a better future for all. We learn to live together, respecting each other's differences freely. So dialogue is an attitude to be lived in everyday life. It's not an activity as part of the many activities that we do. It's an attitude. Dialogue is about trying to put ourselves in the other's shoes, feeling on our skin what it would mean to belong to another religious tradition. It sounds good, but concretely, it could also mean visiting your friends, neighbors, colleagues during their festivities, for example, being there for them when they need you. When you have built a close rapport, you can also then ask them to explain some elements of their religious tradition and try to grasp something new that you learn from them. In short, making the effort to know each other in daily living. You've lived some of these experiences. Pope Francis says, when we approach a person who professes his religion with conviction, his testimony and thoughts ask us and lead us to question our own spirituality. Dialogue thus begins with encounter. So, we become better Christians actually in dialogue. And I hope on our end too, we don't blind the people with the light of Christ, but that the light of Christ through us should illuminate the others. Dialogue also opens new avenues. You might, for example, find common interests and want to start to collaborate in each other's projects, maybe for the marginalized, for the environment, for the betterment of the elderly in your area. Or vice versa, you find someone of another religious tradition doing some good work, join hands, involve your family, community, and simultaneously cultivate the relationship with the person or with the persons. Get to know them on a deeper level. Remember, the point of departure is that we are already brothers and sisters. In dialogue, we all progress together, and it leads to common initiatives that contribute to the benefit of humanity. This is dialogue of life and action. Then in 216, in para 216, Pope Francis speaks of a culture of encounter, which means we as people should be passionate about meeting others, seeking points of contact, building bridges, planning a project that includes everyone. This becomes an aspiration and a style of life. Then there are those who also prepare and form themselves to interreligious dialogue, seeking to understand common points that unite us in our own scriptural texts. We all know that the seeds of the word exist in other religions, but we don't know them. And the more we progress in this direction, the more common ground we will find. But that requires being well prepared. And we have to remember that we dialogue with people, and not with religions. Hence, the focus is on building relationships. Dialogue is not built through an immediate confrontation of ideas or a critical understanding or evaluation of the other's faith by adopting a judgmental approach. In dialogue, we first need to love the person. In para 203, it's written, in a true spirit of dialogue, we grow in our ability to grasp the significance of what others say and do, even if we cannot accept it as our own conviction. In this way, it becomes possible to be frank and open about our beliefs, while continuing to discuss, to seek points of contact, and above all, to work and struggle together. Let's not forget that differences are creative. They create tension, and in the resolution of tension lies humanity's progress. So, as we conclude, I'd just put these 3 points, further 3 points, where the Pope says the duty to respect one's own identity and that of others is important, because true dialogue cannot be built on ambiguity or a willingness to sacrifice some good for the sake of pleasing others. So, to dialogue means being convinced that others have something good to say. It means making room for their viewpoint, their opinion, their suggestions, without obviously slipping into relativism. And in order to keep up a dialogue, it is necessary to lower one's guard and open doors, building trust with one another. Another point, he says, the courage to accept differences, because those who are different, either culturally or religiously, should not be treated as enemies, but rather welcomed as fellow travelers, in the genuine conviction that good of each resides in the good of all. And the third point, sincerity of intentions, because dialogue as an authentic expression of our humanity is not a strategy for achieving specific goals, but rather a path to truth, one that deserves to be undertaken patiently in order to transform competition into cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, for that presentation and your sharing. And thank you so much. We will now